Hey YouTube, Tegan here from Tegan Board Kiteboarding. I'm a passionate kiteboarder and brand ambassador for Lacuna Kites, and this is a full overview and walkthrough video of the new Lacuna Omega V4 from Lacuna Kiteboarding. So I'm going to try and go through everything as in detail as possible because I think there's obviously a lot that went into the design and approach behind this kite, and I think it would do the brand injustice to kind of just skim over the top. So it might be a little bit of a longer video, but stay tuned. So to start off with, the first thing I want to run through is just the approach that the brand has taken, or the shift in approach the brand has taken with two new designers that have come on board. And then I want to go through a full walkthrough of obviously the design and features of the kite and why they've actually added those features into the design in the first place. In terms of the new designers that have come on board, kite designers, so it's Dave and Sue K. They've joined the Lacuna team. They joined about a year and a half ago. They have been in the industry for 20 plus years. They have a huge amount of experience. They've worked behind the scenes on a lot of the big models and big kite brands, so they have a huge amount of experience, and just spending a bit of time with them, you know, here and there and chatting to them, it's kind of really interesting to hear their approach to this kite and the Lacuna brand as a whole. So in terms of the approach to the Lacuna brand, they have obviously taken their kind of wealth of knowledge and experience in the industry and designed every piece of the kite to be as simple and functional and durable as possible. So when I walk through each of the features, I'm going to touch on each of those factors and kind of just fully explain how cleverly this kite and this gear has been designed, because I think a lot of this info goes unnoticed by the average sales team, and I think it's important for the average kiter to actually understand how these kites have been designed and obviously what the purpose of each of these features actually is. So first, with regards to the canopy material, this is obviously ripstop fabric, as every kite brand would use. Ripstop fabric in terms of thickness is measured in grams per square meter. So the average kite brand uses 52 grams per square meter ripstop on their canopy. In terms of, as far as I understand, from a ripstop perspective, you know, some brands go on about double ripstop, triple ripstop, quadruple ripstop, whatever. From what I understand, chatting to Dave and Sue, that is simply just a pattern on the ripstop. It actually doesn't really mean anything. It's more the actual thickness of the ripstop fabric that makes a big difference in terms of the actual durability. So as I said, most kite brands use 52 grams per square meter ripstop on their canopy. Lacuna uses 3 different layers. So this main blue layer here is 65 grams per square meter ripstop, so a little bit thicker, and I'll touch on why they did that in a second. Then that transitions to 75 grams per square meter, and then to 130 grams per square meter ripstop fabric on these kind of wear parts over here. So this 130 gram ripstop then connects to the leading edge bladder, which is Dacron, and that is 160 gram per square meter Dacron. So 2 different types of materials: ripstop fabric for the canopy in 3 layers, 65, 75, and then 130, and then 160 gram Dacron for the leading edge. Now, you may be thinking, well, if they use more durable, or thicker ripstop fabric, the kite's going to be heavier. And yes, that is the case. It is slightly heavier, but in terms of the benefits that thicker ripstop offers, it's a much better trade-off than thinner ripstop. Number one, obviously the kite is more durable. No pinholes. The kite lasts longer. It obviously stays crispy for much longer. If you're a beginner and you're crashing it into the beach, into the water, obviously a lot more durable. And again, you simply, as I mentioned, just get more life out of your kite. Another thing I quite like about the thicker ripstop is because it's simply a thicker fabric, it stays sturdier in the sky and doesn't kind of twist and stretch, I find, when the kite's actually flying. So I personally find you don't actually feel the weight or the added weight of the kite at all. That weight or that extra weight is kind of counted in terms of the actual performance of the kite from its stability in the sky, from that more stiff and durable ripstop fabric on the canopy itself. So then following on from that, the next thing to chat about is the leading edge Dacron. So again, 160 gram Dacron on the leading edge. Reason why it's black, again, black is a little bit boring in terms of a color, but it stops it staining with mud, dirt, whatever, if you know, pumping your kite on the side of a dam, in the parking lot, whatever. So it just keeps the kite looking, you know, simple, clean, and, you know, stain free. Then the next thing to mention is you won't be able to really see it from here. I'll overlay a close-up video, but on the actual wingtip itself, it's got a covering over the seam. So you'll have a seam where the two sections of the leading edge have been sewed together. And if you if you're self-launching a lot and you're scraping that wingtip of your kite along the beach, if you're self-landing, etc., it can wear out those threads and start popping the threads between the two sections of the leading edge. So having a cover or a kind of bumper guard over that thread just helps that thread last longer, and obviously doesn't wear through that if you're scraping that along the sand often. Then while we're on the leading edge, something I personally noticed that they don't really push too hard on the website, and I guess that's because it kind of goes against the average, I guess, marketing strategy from the average kite brand, is the leading edge is actually quite thick for the size of the kite relative to other brands. So for example, the Pivot, the Reed & Supermodel, the Orbit, etc. And a lot of those brands, they sell that thinner leading edge as making the kite fly a lot faster in the window. But what I found with that thinner leading edge is even if you pump that a lot harder than what you would pump the average kite in terms of actual PSI pressure in your bladder, it still kind of buckles and deforms in the sky, especially in super strong wind, because there simply isn't enough reinforcement and strength in that shell or structure of the actual kite to hold it stiff in the wind, especially in very strong gusty winds. So that is the first thing that I noticed with the thicker bladder on the Omega V4 relative to the Pivot. The second thing is, well, Tegan, doesn't the Pivot fly faster in the wind, so sit further forward in the wind window because it's got a thinner bladder? And that's one of the selling points of the Pivot, the Orbit, etc. They fly very fast in the wind window because they've got a small leading edge. And I haven't actually found that to be the case at all. Even though this bladder is a lot thicker, I find this kite to sit much further forward in the wind window than the Pivot, the Orbit, etc. And I've compared this kite to the Orbit 2024 to the Pivot 2023, and this kite sits significantly further forward in the wind window, and I'll touch on that again in just a second. But kind of, I guess, goes against the traditional kite design in that regard, having a thicker bladder to keep the kite more sturdy in the sky, but doesn't affect the upwind ability or the speed of the kite at all from my experience. I guess it does take a little bit longer to pump up when you're pumping on the beach, but in terms of the actual performance that it gives you, it's definitely worth the extra effort. Then next thing on the leading edge is the inflation system. So it's got the usual one pump inflation system. So you obviously inflate the kite at the valve right next to the center strut. Main thing to note there is the valve type that they use. Just grabbing my pump here for a second, the average kite brand normally has a specific fitting that you need to fit onto the front of your pump that then clips to the kite. But the plus about this inflation system is that valve fits straight onto the traditional kite pump fitting. So you don't have to worry about remembering your little connector piece between the kite and your actual kite pump, because the kite fits directly onto that. And also it will fit any pump. So for example, I'm actually still using the first pump I ever got because there's no need to buy a new one, because this obviously fits on my Lacuna Omega. Obviously very handy and very useful just in terms of user friendliness, saving money, etc. Then the second thing about the inflation system is the little connector tubes between the bladders. So between your leading edge bladder and your strut bladders. Sometimes what I've personally found in the past is brands make those little nozzles too small, and over time with being in the sun, being in the salt, etc., when those nozzles are too small, they start kind of corroding a little bit. The plastic starts kind of getting brittle, and then if you're not careful about handling your kite or packing your kite, etc., those little tubes, the nozzles will break off. So kind of the valve or the valve that connects the bladder to the tube, that little nozzle will break off, and that's extremely annoying because then you have to pull the whole bladder out and obviously replace that little nozzle onto your strut bladder. So what Lacuna has done is made those tubes a lot bigger than the average brand. So just to give you a bit of a size comparison, the diameter of that little connector nozzle is about 1.5 centimeters, maybe even 2 centimeters in diameter, as opposed to, I'd say, just under 1 centimeter for the average kite brand. So a lot thicker and a lot more durable, and highly unlikely to give you any problems, especially when the kite starts to get a bit older and those little tubes and connectors start to perish a little bit. Then the next thing to mention is the bridle on the kite. So can't really see it here, but that is a pulley-less bridle, so fixed bridle, no pulleys or sliders. The main thing I like about that is less moving parts equals less problems from my perspective. And the positive with, in my opinion, with a fixed bridle is it gives the kite a very kind of fixed and direct feel. So especially for looping and stuff like that, it gives a very good and kind of constant loop. What I've found with kites with pulleys on the bridles is sometimes during the loop they can kind of readjust, so those sliders will slide slightly as the kite goes through the loop, and it kind of can sometimes cause the kite to deform a little bit through that loop, and it doesn't loop as cleanly as a fixed bridle kite. So for example, Orbit has a fixed bridle. I can't think of any other kites off the top of my head, or I haven't really looked at any other kites off the top of my head, but for example, the Orbit has a fixed bridle, the Omega has a fixed bridle, and it just gives the kite a much more direct feel. You can, in my opinion, feel exactly where the kite is, especially if you heli looping or something like that without looking directly at the kite, and it keeps the kite kind of stiff and fixed throughout that loop and throughout those turns. And then just one last thing with regards to that fixed bridle is it's quite a small and short bridle, and what's cool about that is that it doesn't or can't fit over the wingtip of your kite. So a lot of times what will happen is if you crash your kite really badly, sometimes the bridle can get tangled around your wingtip. Your bridle can get tangled around your wingtip and cause the kite to go into a death loop, so just keep looping out of control. But that can't happen with the Omega because the bridle simply can't fit around the actual wingtip, which is pretty cool. So it makes it very beginner friendly as well. Then just one last thing on the bridle side with regards to that fixed bridle is what I found, especially in super strong wind when you're riding super overpowered and you're putting a lot of tension on the kite itself, what I found with pulleys or sliders is that especially in that case, because that bridle isn't fixed, when you go through a big gust, those pulleys readjust and it causes the kite to kind of deform in the sky, especially again in super strong wind. And I haven't found that with this kite because again, it uses that fixed bridle, which keeps the kite a lot more steady and a lot more secure, especially in stronger wind. Then just one last thing, you'll see at the back over here, it has 3 bar pressure / turning speed settings. So to increase your bar pressure, decrease your turning speed, you can obviously 3 different options to adjust that to your personal preference. I personally leave it on the fastest turning speed, lowest bar pressure, which is the stock setting that the kite comes with. So that was everything in terms of the actual features of the kite. Just my personal opinion of the Omega. I'd say the biggest win for me personally is the fact that it flies so fast in the window. Why I like that is, number one, it helps me get upwind a lot easier. It's kind of almost cheating because it flies so fast upwind. You can obviously tack at a much better angle into the wind, so you don't have to do as many tacks to get upwind, again making it very beginner friendly. The second reason that I like the fact that it flies so fast in the window is for looping. So with a kite loop, you want to jump as vertically as possible, and one part of jumping as vertically as possible is to, number one, not have the kite pull you off your edge on the takeoff, and then number two, for the kite to climb above your head as fast as possible. And all of that is kind of boosted by the fact that the kite flies very fast upwind. So when you take off, the kite's not sitting deep in the window, it's sitting more towards the edge of the window, so it's less likely to pull you off your edge on the actual takeoff. When you're in the air, obviously the kite climbs very fast above your head, so you end up with a very vertical jump. When you loop the kite, because it flies so fast and so far forward in the window, it loops very quickly and recovers very quickly after the loop. So it kind of loops you up in the wind, not really sideways, which is quite an interesting feeling to feel when you loop the kite. Again, obviously once you've looped the kite, because it flies so fast in the window, it's super catchy. So it shoots up above your head and catches you pretty much effortlessly as well. So awesome looping kite on my end. I would say that it doesn't have the jump height of the Orbit or some other 5-strut kites. Lacuna is working on the new 5-strut jumping boosting kite for the Lacuna range. This is obviously the freeride kite in the range. Second thing I'd say there with regards to the actual design of the kite, I really like how everything has been carefully thought out in terms of the actual design of the kite. For example, I love the fixed bridle. I think the direct feel feels really good, especially for example, I forgot about it earlier, a dark slide. When you do the dark slide and you want to feel the loop to pull you out, often you're not looking at the kite looping, you're obviously spotting your landing, and you can feel exactly how far that kite is in the actual loop to catch you or to pull you out of the dark slide, which is pretty cool. Then another thing thing I enjoy about the kite is obviously the durability. From my perspective, just from how much I've used these, so I've got an 8 and a 10, how much I've used them so far, they haven't pretty much worn at all. And that's purely due to the quality of the actual materials themselves. Just a reference as well, these materials are custom made for the Lacuna brand. They're not bought from, for example, Tajin or any of those third-party, brands that make Dacron or ripstop material for the average kite brand. So again, very well thought out and well put together and well built kite. Very beginner proof. Number one, because it flies so fast in the wind window. Number two, because it's very durable. And number three, because it has that fixed bridle, giving it a very direct feel, which is helpful for beginners, obviously trying to get the feel for the actual kite itself. So that was it. Hopefully I covered everything there. If you have any questions, leave those in the comments and I'll get back to you with as much info as I can on any additional info that I missed in this video. But hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully you like this. And if you see me around on the beach or see any of the Lacuna team on the beach, feel free to come and say hi and obviously give the kite a try. So if you made it this far, thanks again for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this, and we'll catch you in the next one. Bye for now.